Today we're asking, why did Jesus live? And I'm going to hand over, who's going to give us 10, 15 minutes to think through why did Jesus live. This is Pete, the minister at Christ Church, Riverside. Thank you, Pete.
Rob. Thank you. Great. It's really good to be here. When he says 10 or 15 minutes, you've got to bear in mind that I'm from Ireland. So they're stretchy, but no, it won't be that long at all. So I'm Peter. And it's really, really good to be here. It's been great chatting to a guy. I've met a newcomer, or I've met somebody I've never met already, and we've had a good conversation already. So let me just encourage you to, during this event today, is to talk about some of the things that really matter, as well as just talking about the football and the weather as well. Let's talk about things that really matter. But I'm going to start with a test of your honesty. I don't know how honest you people are in front of me. How many of you have ever failed an exam? Put your hand up if you failed an exam. Okay, so there's some honest people here. Thank you for being honest. I have probably failed a number of exams, but two stick in my head, okay? One of them, I was a law student at Edinburgh, and there was an exam called company law, and genuinely, I think, because it was just so boring, I couldn't get it to stick in my head, okay? But that's probably just an excuse. I failed. The other one was a more difficult one. It had more problems for me. So I went to Hull. I came to Hull to learn to be a teacher. I did a year of maths, and I opened the envelope at the end of the year, and there was one maths exam that might have needed to be done again. The problem was it was in the week after my wedding. Now, you don't keep a girl waiting for 5 years and then mess up the honeymoon. It's not good strategy to do it. But anyway, if you want to know what happened, you can ask me later. But none of us like to fail. Let's be honest. None of us here like to fail. You were very honest putting your hand up. We don't want to fail. Now, some people here didn't put their hand up, so some people here might never have failed anything. Maybe you've never failed a driving test, an exam, a school report, a martial arts grading. I don't know what else it is you do. Maybe you've never failed anything. Some of the rest of us know what failure tastes like. But I've got some bad news for us all as we begin. For every person in this room, no matter how successful your track record is so far, you and I, we are all failures. Every single one of us, no matter how successful we think we are failures. There's one exam that we're all going to sit one day, and if we sat it now, we would definitely fail. Hold on a minute, let's keep going. Thanks, Jeff, you're keeping me right. Okay, oh yeah, I'm going to leave it to you maybe, because I'll just not remember. I can't do it. I just can't do two things at once. This exam is an exam that God gets to set. It's an exam that He sets. I'm going to call it God's goodness exam. One day, every single person who has ever lived, who's ever been given this amazing gift of life by God, they're going to have to answer to God for the way that they have used this life. And the thing is that God's standards match His own character. They match His own goodness. So the pass mark in God's exam is going to be 100%. It's going to be complete goodness with no badness at all accepted. Now, the truth is, right now, some people maybe here, you don't really care whether you'd pass that exam or not. You don't care about it. Maybe some of you are already a bit offended that I would say that you might fail that exam. How dare God fail me? Maybe you're quite good in your own estimation. Some of you maybe even think that God doesn't have a right to set such an exam for you. But then there will be some of you who will be nodding and thinking, yeah, it's true. If I stood before God, I would fail. Some of you maybe wouldn't even want the people beside you to know some of the skeletons that are in your closet. But the truth is, the fact is, no matter what your attitude is towards that, one day we're going to face God, and one day He's going to want answers from us. So what I want to urgently do now, just in the next few minutes, is to show you that although we can't and we won't match up to God's goodness, because God is so very good, He has made a way for that exam to be passed. And it's all tied up with today's question: why did Jesus live? So here's a good answer to that question. Here's a good summary answer that I'm going to be working with for the next few minutes. Jesus lived so He could perfectly pass God's goodness exam for us. So Jesus lived so He would perfectly pass God's goodness exam on our behalf for us. There's a part of the Bible on the tables in front of you, and it's one of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' death on the cross. I'm going to read the Bible passage to you now, And I want you to listen to it, and I want you to be amazed at how different people responded to Jesus as he was dying. But also I want you to look out even more and be even more amazed at the way Jesus responded to others in his last few hours. So this is from a gospel called Luke, and it's near the end of it. And this is what it says. As Jesus was on the cross, 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the king of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you're under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." It's an incredible passage in the Bible. It's an incredible eyewitness account. But you might, if you're thinking already, you might be thinking, well, it's a very strange thing to deal with Jesus as he dies, to try to answer the question, why did Jesus live? But with every single person, you can see what they're really made of when the pressure comes on. So somebody gave me this picture one time of a toothpaste tube being squeezed. If you take the lid off and you squeeze a toothpaste tube, you see what comes out, don't you? So if you squeeze something, what comes out shows you what's inside. And so when you're under the greatest pressure, when you're squeezed the most, what comes out shows what you are really made of. Well, you see, up to this point on the cross, Jesus' whole life had been one of complete, utter perfection. Perfect. Now, not the sort of perfection that annoys you. Do you know that sort of holier-than-thou perfection? People who think they're better than you, Ned Flanders in The Simpsons, that sort of thing. Not that sort of perfection. No, his perfection was a wonderful, compassionate, loving, attractive, caring perfection that meant he was constantly surrounded by people who wanted to be near him and wanted him to help them. You see, up to this point on the cross, Jesus would pass God's goodness exam with flying colours. Despite a whole life full of tiredness, despite a whole life full of hard people, difficult family relationships, constant opposition, as well as popularity and praise and attention. Both of those things send people off the wrong direction, don't they? But Jesus had them all in his life. And despite all of those things, he had only done what is good and right all of the time. Jesus completely and utterly practiced what he preached. He did love the Lord, his God, with all his heart and all his soul and all his mind and all his strength. And he did love his neighbour as himself, even when it hurt him loads to do so. But with nails hammered through his hands and feet, and with a body that is battered and scarred by the worst of human brutality, what is going to come out of Jesus when he is squeezed as he has never been squeezed before? Well, I hope you noticed it. If you have it on your sheet, look what came out of him just up there, verse 34. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Now that's incredible. That is an incredible thing to come out of somebody when they're at their lowest point in life. So just you think for a moment how hard you find it to forgive anyone, even for the smallest of offenses that they may have caused you. So if you're a driver, if you're on the road and you drive a car, think how difficult it is to forgive somebody when they just cut in front of you really rudely. You get really angry, don't you? It's really hard to forgive them. You want to follow them. You want to cut back in front of them and wave your fist, or worse. Or think about if you're queuing at Tesco or at Heron, somebody just nips in front of you. It's annoying, isn't it? It gets you angry. Are you good at forgiving for small things? Let's go up a ratchet. Like if somebody insults you in front of others, are you good at forgiving them? Let's go up even more. If somebody damages your family, would you be good at forgiving them? Can you let it go? You see, Jesus, who had lived perfectly, he had loved people completely his whole life. He's being killed with criminals in the most horrific of ways. And yet his prayer at that moment is, Father, forgive them. You see, look what came out of Jesus at his lowest point. But then notice what didn't come out. See, while his clothes are being gambled for at his feet, while the rulers who had plotted to get him on the cross in the first place, while they're sneering at him and scorning him, while the soldiers who had assaulted him were mocking him, and while even one of the criminals beside him joined in, Jesus didn't respond at all. There was no arguing. There was no bitter words. There was no justifying himself. There was nothing at all. So take another moment just to think about the last time someone offended you. Just don't think about it too long because you get angry. But think about it for a moment. Try and think the last time somebody offended you. Now, did your thoughts and your words and your actions, did they match up to Jesus' incredible standards at this point in his life? You see, Jesus' goodness is most clearly seen at this, his lowest point. It's no normal goodness. See, this remarkable goodness, it does two remarkable things for the most unexpected character in the story. The criminal, one of the criminals on the cross, suddenly realizes Jesus' identity and Jesus' purpose. We often call him the thief on the cross. He's most people's, or one of most people's favorite characters in the Bible. Actually, he's one of my favorite characters in the whole Bible story. I love this story. We call him the thief on the cross, but he might have been a murderer. We don't exactly know exactly all the things that he did. But you see, as this guy's life is bleeding away, the same as Jesus, and as this guy is struggling to breathe, hanging on that cross, the same as Jesus, he's been watching Jesus. And so what does he do when the other criminals laughing at Jesus? He rebukes this guy. He says to him, look, we're punished justly. We're getting what we deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. Now, this isn't just a simple observation for this guy. I was talking at our table, I was talking about hope. This is the explosion of hope into this guy's life, into his brokenness, into his suffering, and into his doom. See, the dying criminal looks at how Jesus is living, even in these last few hours, maybe especially because it's in these last few hours. He sees love, he sees kindness, he sees care, he sees forgiveness, even with nails in Jesus' hands and feet. And this guy knows who Jesus is. And he knows why Jesus has come. He looks at Jesus dying, and he knows that God himself has come to rescue sinful people who would put their hope in Jesus. What does he say to him? Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. See, the Bible is full of brilliant stuff. But there are few simple sentences that are better than that one in the whole of the books of the Bible. And that sentence from that criminal is a big part of why some of these guys here are inviting you and inviting others to come this week, or maybe they invited you to come to church before. You see, Jesus is 100% goodness. The Bible calls it righteousness. It's got a word for it. But Jesus' 100% goodness has shown this man that despite his bad life, the Bible calls it a sinful life, a life lived on your own terms, a life lived without God in charge. But Jesus' goodness has shown this guy that despite his own badness, despite him falling short of this 100% goodness that's needed, it's shown him that God's goodness exam can be passed because Jesus can pass it for him. You see, the response of this thief on the cross to Jesus, it's 100% the right response. He counts himself responsible for his own badness. And he acknowledges Jesus' utter goodness. And he realizes that his only hope at this most frightening, threatening, terrible moment of his life is to cry out to Jesus for help. And King Jesus, that sign that we read that was above his head, which was nearly right, he's not just the king of the Jews, he's the king of the whole universe. But King Jesus answered him with beautiful words, says to this dying criminal, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. See, why did Jesus live? Well, Luke's gospel, okay, the bit of the Bible that we take this account from, it gives a really short explanation for why did Jesus live. It says this: Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. Jesus' 100% goodness, when he lived on this earth, it revealed his identity, it revealed his purpose, but it also qualified him to do something incredible on our behalf. Something you can hear more about tomorrow when Rich talks about why Jesus died, actually. But you see, this qualification, it means Jesus can offer anyone the chance to pass God's goodness exam, the chance to be saved forever. You see, that very day, the condemned criminal, as he breathed his last few hours of breath, he started a new life, a new life that would last forever, a new life that would go way past death into eternity with Jesus. That guy's response to Jesus was exactly right. It'd be great to leave it there. But there's one more thing to say. You see, it wasn't everyone's response in the account, was it? Some people were just totally apathetic about Jesus. As you read it, you can read it again during the dinner time. Some people just were watching as Jesus lived his last few hours on this earth. They weren't saying anything. They weren't engaging. They were just watching. They were more or less unaffected by the life of Jesus. Now, in a gathering like this, there's always some watchers. People who are interested enough maybe to be here, but not really bothered by Jesus either way. But the watchers don't end up saved in this account. The watchers fail God's exam. There's others in this account who are really offended by Jesus. They're the religious people. They were the very moral people. And they weren't just standing watching. They were pouring scorn on Jesus, even though they had sort of manipulated to get him to this point. They were really angered by Jesus' rejection of their religion. They sneered at him. He saved others. Let him save himself. But you see, in a gathering like this, there's some good religious people. People who know they're good or think they're good. And maybe the idea that they need Jesus to save them makes them a bit angry, makes them a bit offended. But the moral people, the religious people in this account, they're not saved. They fail God's exam. And then there were others in the account who were just scathing about Jesus. The soldiers and even one of the criminals, they're hurling insults at Jesus. Now, it wasn't that he had offended their religion. I think it was probably more that they just looked at this pathetic person on the cross and were offended that this guy could think he could rule over anyone. And so, not content with brutalizing them, and the soldiers did some awful things to Jesus, they mock him even when he suffers. Now, I hope you're not, but maybe some of you even here are mockers. Maybe the very idea of Jesus and Christianity sounds pathetic to you. But the soldiers don't end up saved in this account. You see, they fail God's exam. There's only one person in this account who recognized what was so incredible about Jesus. Only one person benefited from Jesus' 100% good, his righteous life. And so the question that I want to leave with, and I'll pass back over to Rob now, but the question I just want to leave you with is this: what is your response going to be to Jesus? Thank you for listening, and we'll pass over to Rob, and he can keep us going. Let us know what happens next. Thank you, Rob.